the messianic signs, if you like, of their impending freedom or redemption. He puts it in two ways. Well, what does Jesus do in Scripture? He leads the people, theoretically, out into the wilderness, and what does he do there? He shows them the signs. And what are the signs? He multiplies the loaves and the fishes. He turns water into wine. And these are the signs according to the Gospels. Well, he's one of these kind of people who is leading the people out into the wilderness to show them the signs. So is Theudas. And what happens to Theudas? He gets butchered. Well, the Romans don't like this sort of agitation in this period and consider it to be a threat. And John the Baptist likewise. So I think all these are consistently part of the same stream of individuals. And we say, no, Jesus was different. Yes, because the Gospels present a different Jesus who is at peace with the Roman Empire and not with his own people. So that's something you're going to have to decide about. But anyway, they also present a popular Jesus. And I don't think that you're going to have a popular Jesus at peace with the Roman Empire. Okay. But Phaz did not suffer them to enjoy their folly. He sent a troop of horsemen against them, and who fell on them and slew many, but he took Theudas captive and then beheaded him. Theudas is beheaded in this period. Now I, in my work, consider Theudas one of the brothers of Jesus. That is Judas of James. That is, Theudas is a name for Judas. Thaddeus, Judas, Theudas. It's also Theudas is mentioned in the Nag Hammadi materials as the brother of the just one. Well, Theudas is the brother of the just one. In theory, the literature of the just one is supposed to be James. The letter of Jude, he's called the brother of James. This is tenuous, I admit. The other thing that I think is interesting about Theudas as a brother of Jesus is that he's doing a Jesus-like miracle. Jesus is the Greek name for Joshua, and Theudas is presenting himself as a Jesus, as a Joshua incarnate, what we call a Joshua redivivus, a Joshua come back to life. So Theudas is a kind of, I argue this in my James book quite extensively, a Joshua redivivus, a Joshua come back to life. And who is, what is that? That's a Jesus come back to life, because Jesus is the Greek name for Joshua. So Theudas too is doing a Jesus or Joshua-like miracle, or attempting to do a Jesus or Joshua-like miracle. So he's a very important character. What is the problem in Acts? I think we've mentioned it. The anachronism in Acts. We'll do it again when we get there, but suffice it to say that Gamaliel, who also appears in the Pseudo-Clementines as a secret Christian and supporter of the early Christians, gives a speech in favor of the early Christians in the book of Acts, saying, you shouldn't meddle with these people, God is on their side. And then he quotes some things. You remember Theudas, who thought he was somebody and caused a lot of trouble, and after him came Judas the Galilean, and so on and so forth. And that's the anachronism in Acts, because we know that Judas the Galilean came before Theudas by about 40 years, not afterwards. And I think that, again, as I've argued in my book, I can explain that, and I've done it already to you, I think, previously, but even if you don't remember, or I didn't, the explanation, I think, is quite simple. In the Antiquities, again, if you read it carefully, Josephus first mentions Theudas. Then he mentions the two sons of Judas the Galilean, who he says was executed at the time of the census. So in talking about the two sons of Judas the Galilean who are executed next, he tells us that who Judas the Galilean was. So the writer of Acts, working quickly or even from memory off text like this, gets it confused, seeing quickly in his cursory reading of Josephus that Judas the Galilean was mentioned after Theudas. So therefore, he puts Judas the Galilean after Theudas in the speech by Gamaliel. That's my explanation for that, that Judas the Galilean, in fact, was mentioned after Theudas, but the mention was to explain who his two sons were, who were executed in a preventive execution in 48 AD. This is all very complicated. If you haven't read Josephus, I've urged you to try to take a look at that, but you don't really need to. We have the most of the material here. Okay, so that's enough about that. We're going to come back to it when we do the book of Acts. He does then go on to mention Queen Helen, who Josephus also tells us at that time was involved in famine relief. And that's why he tells us about the famine, and he also tells us about famine relief. Of course, he doesn't mention a prophet called Agabus. And I think I will be able to explain that from the Eusebius materials about Agabus, who is considered in Syriac sources to be Queen Helen's husband. So the prophet Agabus is, to my mind, will turn out to be a garbled version of Agabus that the writer of the book of Acts has also confused or garbled or on purpose done this with. And he appears again. Agabus will appear again, but I promise you there was never a Palestinian prophet called Agabus. But there are prophets in this period whom Agabus or Agabus or whomever reflect. And I think we'll be able to show. I know who the second Agabus is and who he reflects in the actual time. But this is very specialized knowledge, and we're doing it in a class like this, and I don't expect you can talk to anyone in the bigger world about this, because they do not have the sources you have now. They don't have the text before them. They only have the one source, and it's like talking to someone about the Quran. When someone's only read the Quran, you can't tell them about things that came before the Quran. They get very angry at you. And try talking to a Muslim about anything that came before Muhammad, and they get very, very agitated and aggressive. In fact, they get sometimes murderous. They literally want to cut your head off, because cutting people's heads off seems to be a very popular thing in the Middle East, as we see. We don't hear anyone in the Middle East complaining about taking a knife and so on. We're going back to the barbarism of the Middle Ages in the world without even a murmur of protest. I mean, this should be so shocking that the German and the French and all these other supposedly moral people should be jumping in to join the effort to put this down once and for all in the modern universe, but they are not, and it's very sad. So I mean, this people cutting people's heads off for real or imagined slights is a very widespread thing. So if you tell people, forget the New Testament or the Old Testament or Talmud or whatever, if you tell them anything about the Quran or before the Quran that they don't like hearing, they get extremely murderous. So if you're feeling murderous in your heart sometimes about things that I may say, it's not surprising. It's the normal reaction of people